what I'm doing is working, and just having faith in that, in my skill set and my ability to sell businesses for good prices and leaving my clients very happy.
Sweden's a beautiful country. Like it's on the top of my list. Definitely want to check it out. Big fan of hiking and nature and mountains.
That's right. So the best place, if you're into that stuff, there's this place called Höga, which means the high coast, which is exactly that. It's like a really high coast. There's lots of mountains.
How's the snow in Sweden? Because I know the snow seasons are amazing in Europe, apparently. Is that a...
So it doesn't snow as much here. We're in Stockholm, which is in the south part of Sweden. But if you go up north, it's definitely a lot more prevalent. We've done snow holidays up north, and yeah, it's pretty cool. Like, you do they're like jet skis, but on snowmobiles. And then, like dog sledding and all sorts of other cool stuff you can do up there.
That's so crazy. And then, because I know there's this YouTuber that I watch, I think he's from Europe, and he does all these crazy skis and snowboarding, but just off like terrain. It's not like a public, it's like natural. He somehow gets to the top either through hiking or through sled dogs. And yeah, there's a lot of this sort of nature, because in Australia we go on tracks and everything's sort of like not man-made, but there's like snow machines, and we do get snow, but not that much. But there's not...
No, I know. I'm from Australia too. So.
Oh, are you from Australia?
Yep. I wasn't born there, but I was raised there from the age of 2 up until now, or recently.
So did you only recently move to Sweden?
It was about 4 years ago.
Oh, wow. What made you want to do that move?
My partner, she was born and raised here in Sweden. We decided to move here and give it a try, and it kind of stuck.
Wow. So what's your perspective? Like, now that you've lived in sort of 2 different countries, I think we're like pretty similar, like both pretty expensive countries, similar weathers, I guess, similar nature.
No, definitely not. So Australia doesn't really seem to have seasons. I never really knew what seasons were until we came and started living here. It is like the iconic perfect, in spring all the flowers bloom. In summer it's warm and sunny most of the time. In autumn all the leaves start falling off the trees, and in winter it snows. That doesn't happen in Australia. So it's just either wet or it's cold. It's either warm or it's cold, or it's wet or it's dry. That's basically the extent of what it's like in Australia. Whereabouts are you based? Are you in Melbourne, or are you a bit further north?
Sydney.
Sydney, yeah. So it's basically that. I'm from Brisbane, so it's a little bit more of a warmer climate, but the concept's still pretty much the same in Sydney. So.
How about the summers? How hot does it get in Sweden?
So recently we've had a bit of a heat wave. It got up to like 30 to 33 degrees Celsius, which is extremely hot for here. Like it felt like a Australian summer, but less humid maybe. It's actually kind of nice. Everyone's going, oh my God, it's so hot. I'm like, yeah, it's kind of nice actually. I miss it. Yeah.
And then were you always doing sort of were you always a broker, or is that something you've picked up over the last few years?
No, I've not always been a broker. This is something that, so I started buying and selling businesses for myself in 2012. And I was a sole operator for quite a while. I had some investors and stuff that would, help me with some capital, etc. But then I realized that basically my superpower was more around the selling. So most of the money that we made in our portfolio is when we sold. And then we would use that money to then roll into other investments. And, I've always been a fan of that process, and I felt like I was pretty good at it, and eventually just got pushed in that direction just fairly naturally, and sort of opened my brokerage maybe about three years ago now. So it took me that long to sort of hone in on that skill set, and sort of haven't really looked back since. I don't think I own a single website anymore for my own portfolio. I'm focused pretty much entirely on my brokerage now.
Awesome. Tell me about the brokerage. How does it work?
So if you have a business, online businesses only, so e-commerce, content, etc., that's making profit, so it's making money every month, like say a minimum of 300 up to a maximum of, well, there really isn't much of a maximum, then you come to me and I will help you find a buyer, compile all the information in a way that buyers like to see. So, all of the KPIs, key performance indicators, profit and loss, seller interview, all of these things that I put together to help sell my clients' businesses. And then once we find a buyer, I help close the deal, help with the negotiations, put together the terms, sales agreements, and then help with the transfer, etc. So every step along the way is basically what I do to help. And I have a team around me also that helps me, keep things on track.
Interesting. And tell me about your relationship with Flipper.
Yeah, so I am an authorized Flipper broker. I am an independent broker, so I work for myself, but I also work with Flipper. So we're sort of partners in a way. Most of the businesses that I list will go on flipper.com. And if you've not heard of flipper.com, the easiest, simplest way to describe it is just eBay, but for online businesses. So, but there's a very wide variety that you'll find on there. And it's difficult to find, or sometimes can be difficult to find the good ones, because a lot of, like, if you have a business, anybody can list there. You don't have to be a broker to list your business there. But of course, being a broker, I've got a lot more experience, and we vet our numbers. We make sure that everything that we post is as accurate as we can. And there's a lot more trust there that's built up, rather than someone who might be just trying to scam you, which does happen, unfortunately. Very difficult to monitor that kind of stuff, although Flipper does do a good job with that. Certainly a lot better than they used to.
And what's stopping, or why don't people go straight to Flipper?
People do. Yeah, of course people do. That's a very common thing. Most of the listings on Flipper that you'll see will be people who are listing their businesses themselves. And that's fine. That's sort of how it was originally built. Yeah, so that's normal. But I mean, it's obviously slightly more expensive to go with a broker, but they literally take so much off your plate. Like, I take pretty much everything. There's a bit of work to start with so that I understand, the ins and outs of the business. But once I have all the information, I field all of the questions that come in from all of the buyers. I negotiate, I close the deal, and the amount of work that actually goes into each listing is actually quite a lot. And a lot of buyers a lot of sellers don't really even know that that's how much work is actually needed. Even just getting the business ready for sale, there's a lot of really common mistakes that you see all the time. Like, people think that once they've listed it for sale, they can stop working on the business. It happens a lot. I mean, can laugh about it, but it's like, I don't know, if you don't find a buyer straight away with that strategy, the next month is going to be, probably going to be quite a lot less in revenue. And then all of a sudden the business is worth less and much harder to find a buyer.
Interesting. What's the average turnaround time for your clients when they come to you till when they sell?
So I track when the listing goes live. It usually takes me, I think the average is roughly 19 days to find a buyer, on average. So that was based on a data set that I took last year, pretty much the trailing 12 months. And it's a bit longer, obviously, if we count all of the time it takes to prep the business for sale. That's usually about 1 or 2 weeks. There's a bit of back and forth, and then obviously the creation of the content that we put with the Flipper listing. And then, of course, there's more time on the other end. Once it's sold, it varies quite a lot as well, because obviously the money has to be secured in escrow, accounts have to be set up, and then obviously the transfer of the business has to happen. But I mean, if I was to estimate, if we say it takes 3 weeks for us to find a buyer from when it's listed, 2 weeks before that, so 5, plus maybe another 2 weeks on the other end. So from start to finish, roughly 2 months. That's pretty normal. Obviously, it can be faster. It depends on who your buyer is. It depends on how quickly you get the information to me. And, I mean, we just sold one business that I think the first or second day that it was live for like a really good multiple. And that deal was done, I think, in maybe 2 or 3 weeks from start to finish. But that's not very common, but it can happen.
That's pretty cool. Where do you guys find majority of your buyers? Is it always on Flippa? Do you have like an email list? Do you use other sort of websites to list these stores on?
No, I exclusively list on Flippa. Most of the buyers generally come from there. They have a huge buyer pool. Like, it's unrivaled. There are no brokerages out there that even come close. So if you're looking for buyers, then that's the best place to go. However, you find that there are a lot of newbies there who are like dipping their toe in the water and are only looking for smaller investments and things like this. But yeah, so I also obviously have my own email list that I've accumulated over the years. That's just something that I categorize. So if you're on my list, you're only getting businesses that are suited or matching your search or what you're looking for. So I try and keep it nice and tailored so that if you're getting an email from me, it's either a newsletter, which is sort of like catch-all, or it's very specific to what you're looking for.
Got it. And do you ever like outreach to existing Flippa listings and be like, hey, your listing sucks. Do you want to work with us? We can make it way better and get you a sale in 19 days.
As much as I would love to do that, Andy, I'm not allowed to do that because that would essentially be me taking business away from Flippa. That is against our terms, but Flippa do send me leads if let's just say the seller, they're having trouble. They're like not getting as much attention as they want. They reach out to Flippa. It's like, oh, what can I do? Flippa will sometimes recommend, let's go with the broker, and then they'll make the introduction. If Flippa sends me the lead, then of course that's a lead that they've sent to us, which means they get a higher portion or higher cut than normally if I bring the lead to Flippa, which is only fair. Then that way I basically start the process more or less from scratch. Sometimes they have a good listing and most of the time they don't, and it takes quite a bit of work to fix it up. As much as I would love to do that, to fix the marketplace, not only do I probably don't have enough time to go through and do that. I get enough leads without needing to do that. So, yeah.
When people come to you, or when leads come to you, do they know Flippa exists? Are they still already listed on Flippa? Or do they sort of come to you with a blank slate?
It's pretty rare that they haven't heard of Flippa, at least. I think it has happened a couple of times where they're hesitating to list on Flippa. They don't want it to be as public or whatever. And they prefer to do a private deal. Most of the time I can accommodate that. Obviously, I have my own list of buyers who I can reach out to and usually find a buyer for their business. Most of the time, Flippa is pretty well known in the industry. If you're looking for a website broker, chances are you've come across Flippa.
Got it. And how does your service work? Is it like a percentage on the final sales price? And does it include the Flippa fee? Does it pay both the Flippa fee and your fee?
No, it's just the one fee. It's all rolled in together. There is no listing fee, so it doesn't cost anything to enlist me as your broker. And then at the end, once we found a buyer and the deal has successfully completed, I don't get my money until my client gets the money. That's how we've set it up to work. So that's how most brokers will work also. Sometimes there'll be a listing fee. I think actually Flippa does charge a listing fee if you were to list it there yourself, but that's waived going through a broker.
Got it. And I guess what's your own criteria, Joe, so that you don't pick up some store that is nearly impossible to sell and waste your time?
Yeah, so it's pretty extensive. I do turn down leads for various reasons. The most common reason is, of course, it's too small. Like it has to be a certain size for it to be worth me selling. So, if a business is not making any money, of course, I can't sell that because you maybe get $1,000, if that, for a business that's not making any money. And then, of course, there are things like when we're talking about the client. So there are a few clients that I've turned down because they're too unresponsive, they're too slow, they don't come back to me in time. And I've seen time kill many, many deals. So that's another reason. But in terms of criteria, my focus is mostly on content businesses, advertising, affiliate. That's sort of my bread and butter, just because that's what I did personally when I ran my own portfolios. I also do SaaS, dropshipping, e-commerce as well, but I just do less of those. I find that the multiples tend to be a bit lower for those e-commerce businesses. Given that I've never personally run one of those, my insights are less than, the content businesses. That doesn't mean that I haven't had, some pretty nice sales with those business models as well. So of course, if you're listening to this and have an e-commerce business, I'm certainly willing to have a look and we can have a chat.
When it comes to content brands and websites, what's the average multiple on that, like multiple on the profit?
Okay, so we can use content. I have a valuation tool that I use for each business that or each client that comes across. Obviously we're looking at many, many different factors. But I mean, if we're just using ballpark figures, it would be roughly between 25. So I use monthly times multiple because everything online is monthly. So you're looking at the monthly profit, the monthly traffic, the monthly everything. So I use a monthly multiple rather than a yearly one. There will be lots of people out there. I think even Flip is sort of gearing towards the yearly now, but I find that confusing because 3.2 times the yearly profit. How many months is that? I don't know. It just confuses me. I'm a bit old school like that, I guess. But so if we're just going from monthly profit, so this would be, so say if it's making 1,000 a month, just for simplicity, and it's a content business, you'd be looking at somewhere between 25 and 40x the monthly profit. So that's between 25,000 and 40,000 for a business that's making 1,000 per month. Obviously, there are lots of variations. Sometimes you'll get less than that, sometimes you'll get more than that. And it really just depends on things like the potential of the business, like what's being left on the table. Maybe the seller hasn't had much experience with online businesses and haven't properly monetized the business as well as they could have. Buyers will see this and often capitalize on that or offer more because of it. There are other things like how many revenue streams are there. So a business that only has one revenue stream is typically worth less than one that has 3 or 4, just because there's a bit more diversity there. If something happens to one of the affiliate accounts, for example, there's other revenue there that it can fall back on. Same goes for traffic. Diversity, like with most investments, is really important. So the more diverse the business, the less risk usually it has.
Got it. And with the content brand, like if we treat it like an asset, a content brand that was making $1,000 a month 5 years ago in 2018 versus now, how much are those, is it worth? Is it worth the same price? Has the multiple increased or decreased?
No, it's gone up quite a lot actually, and some people would look at that as a bad thing. But really, all that's happened is the market's just evolved. It was when I was buying businesses, it wasn't that uncommon to find a decent content business for 15 times the monthly profit. So that was sort of where I would target. There are some old interviews of me out there where I'm saying, 15x is sort of what I'm looking for. It's pretty rare to come across a really good business for 15 times the monthly profit these days. It can happen usually if you're doing it privately, but or if there are some issues with the business. So say if it's on a massive downtrend or something like this, there are exceptions, and they're usually pretty obvious as to why. Yeah. So, but I mean, like I said, I would pick up businesses for roughly 15x, maybe 5-10 years ago. It wasn't that difficult to do. Whereas now you're looking more around 25 to 30 as a minimum for content businesses.
Got it. So do you think would it be considered as an appreciating asset? Do you think it will continue? If you buy a store do you think, and you don't work on it, you don't make it better, you just keep it the same, or a content brand website, do you think it's just going to keep appreciating, or eventually it will top off and then you're just relying on the cash flow?
That's an excellent question. And obviously, I don't have a crystal ball. It's impossible to say this for sure. But I can say that there are lots of other brokerages out there which are actively pushing the multiple up. If you compare online businesses to offline businesses, where you're actually like running a store, like a bakery or something, you can sell a bakery for, I think the average is, between 3 and 4 times the yearly profit. The versatility that an online business has over an offline business is so much more. Like, you can run it from anywhere. It is more passive. You don't have to work as hard on it. Money just comes in automatically while you're sleeping. There are so many more benefits of doing it that way. And not only that, you can hire staff from all around the world. You're not limited to just one area or one focus group. So I think that it is going to continue to go up, but I do think that there is a ceiling. There is a point at which the market will mature and it will find its place. The thing that a lot of people don't realize is that the online, 30 years ago, there was almost no internet, and that wasn't the case for offline businesses or real estate or anything like that. It's a pretty new space even now, despite the fact that I've been doing it for 10 years and there are people out there who have been doing it for 20, 30 years. So
interesting. How has these blog content type websites survived for so long? It's been like 10, 15 years. Like the dropshipping trend, that's sort of toppling off, and I'm in the dropshipping space and that's sort of slowly off. And I'm surprised that people still buy and invest in these sort of blogs. And I thought people would move to YouTube, and I thought blogs are just dying off. What's your thoughts?
Yeah, so the thing with YouTube is that, yes, it's a very popular platform, but as far as I'm aware, at least last I checked, it's not possible to sell a YouTube channel on its own. You need to have a business attached with it, which is sort of where these content businesses come in. It also gives you another arm to your marketing channel. So it depends on you focus on what your skill set is. The reason why they're still around is because they're tried and true. They work. You say that the dropshipping model is sort of starting to dip. I personally haven't seen that much of a difference in what's happening in the dropshipping space. I think that like any market, it ebbs and flows. But as long as it is a viable business model, it will continue to be worth money. So, if something is making X amount per month, that's worth something to somebody. So, so long as it's, able to be taken over by another person, it's sellable.
What happens if, I have a store that probably made, say, $300,000 in revenue, but majority of it made like $200K in like 2018. And ever since then, it's just been trickling. Maybe it's doing like 1 or 2 sales a day, maybe like a few hundred a month. But if you look at the lifetime revenue, it has like a massive, nice 300K figure. How tough would that be to sell?
So I typically look at the last 12 months as a minimum. I will look further back if it has generated some form of asset. So let's just say if it is a dropshipping business, chances are during that high period, you picked up a lot of email addresses, and you should have them you've got an asset there that is now worth something as a result of that, high period. Usually when that happens, it shows that the business is capable of more than what it's doing now. Sometimes not, and you have to be careful about this because sometimes it's not. Like, they may have been using a marketing strategy that worked back then that won't work now. So that's something that would be important to dig into if you're the buyer of a business like this. But typically, I don't look at that income. So because it's too old, I will look at the last 12 months. Sometimes less, like the valuation typically will be done on the last 12-month average. But if the business is significantly declining or increasing, I'll use a lower month average, so 6 or 3 months even sometimes, though that's rare.
How consistent, especially with the content model, how consistent is a monthly revenue and profit? And is it easy to teach the buyer how to maintain that? Because in business, like, I've learned the hard way that there's nothing that is 4 hours a week, work on your laptop. Everything requires a lot of work. Is it the case with these blog websites, or are they pretty much set and forget?
No, very few businesses are set and forget unless you have a team that is maintaining them. So, the desire is for that passive income. You can set it up, but it's never truly 100% passive. There is always something that you'll need to do, whether it's just some research around what keywords or what information to do next, content to post next, or if something happens, like the website needs to be updated to the latest version of WordPress and security, things like that. There's always something to do.
With those blog websites, would you be needing to hire copywriters to constantly put out new content, new blogs? And do you have to learn SEO to then figure out how to constantly get more traffic? And how do you teach that to the buyer? And can the buyer truly learn that and rely and be like, okay, this made $1,000 a month and I can definitely do that as well?
Yes, it's usually involves some external help. For a typical content business, there is quite a few things that you need to think about. Content and SEO are probably the two that are most important for most content businesses. You can hire help, but it depends on how profitable the business is. Sometimes it's better that you do it yourself for the first little while, grow it, get it to the point where the profit margins are high enough to support hiring out that help. I sell businesses for people who are writing all the content themselves. And so if a buyer is looking at a business like that, they need to also consider, am I going to be the one that writes all the content? And if no, how much is it going to cost me? So there are things like that you have to look at. And of course, there are plenty of SEO agencies and stuff like that you can go to help you with that if you don't want to learn it yourself. I do recommend that you learn at the very least the basics, so you can know roughly how SEO works, what sort of metrics Google will be looking at, what's important to them. So then that way you have a broad picture at least of what the business needs to do moving forward. The other benefit, of course, buying off someone who has done this already, they already have a lot of insights and they know what works because they've done it themselves. So you can pick their brains and figure out what worked for them and just continue to do that. And often that's enough.
Is that a good idea to buy and look for some website that is by some person that he writes all his content himself? He hasn't really scaled it. It takes a lot of time. Could someone like me just come in, buy that website? I have a lot of virtual assistant, content writers, copywriters, plug that in. And if he's creating one new blog post a week, multiply that by 7, create 7 blog posts a week and 3x the revenue. Is it that simple, or is it more complicated than that?
No, it isn't. It is that simple. Obviously, the more content you put out there, the higher the chances are that you'll get one that really works, and more traffic, more revenue, etc. So yeah, of course, if you have budget or you have the team already in place, that gives you a huge advantage over someone who doesn't. So yeah, definitely. And it can simply be that easy, which is why it's such an attractive business model. And it's why, it's typically higher multiples than what you would expect most e-commerce businesses to sell for, just because it's so much more passive.
So if I want to dip my toes, how cheap could I get one of these content blog website for? Something that's sort of currently making money, it's reliable, but I just want to dip my toes. I don't want to spend 10, 20 grand. I just want to put in a smaller amount of money, plug my copywriters in and see if it works. Yep.
All right. So the very first business that I ever bought back in 2012 I bought it for $700. And at the time it was making like $50 to $70 a month. So you can still buy profitable businesses for pretty low amounts. I personally don't broker them because they'll be too small, but you can find them. I doubt you'll pick one up for that good a multiple, not these days. That business obviously died. It was one of those built for AdSense businesses. It had 5 pages in it. The domain name was the keyword it was targeting and things like that. That doesn't work these days for SEO. So, but I would suggest It would depend on your budget. 10K for a lot of people is a lot of money, but I would still consider that a beginner-friendly site, just simply because for it to be worth spending money on to grow, you need to have some profit there to help support that expense. The bigger the business, the easier it is to spend money on it, essentially. With that said, if you just wanted to dip your toe in the water just to sort of see if it's something that resonates with you, you can start small, test it out, learn it, see it more of an education tool rather than like an investment, or rather an investment in your education or your experience. And then if it resonates with you, or if it's something that you can see yourself scaling up and going bigger, then that's a good way to get started. And a lot of people do this at all different price ranges. So it's very, very individual. I'm talking to someone right now who has never owned an online business before, but is looking at a $50,000 business because he's got the capital, and that's a small portion of his capital that he has available. He originally, I had a call with him, and he wanted to buy a business for over 300K. I'm like, maybe, think about this. Maybe it's better to buy multiple smaller businesses. Not only do you have a bit more diversification, you have less risk, or, you don't put all your eggs in one basket kind of thing. So, and then that way he can try it, see if he likes it, and then, potentially invest more.
What does a website that costs 10K beginner friendly look like? Like, how much profit is it making a month? What are the expenses? What are the revenue streams? And what's the output like? How many blogs is the owner creating each day?
Yeah, so typically you're looking at one that's making about 200 to 250 a month profit. That usually will give you enough of a buffer to create content for that business using those profits. It depends on if we're talking about a content. Obviously, we're talking mostly about content businesses here.
That multiple is really high, is it not? 250 a month, so 10,000 divide that by 250. That'll be a multiple of 40. Got it.
Yeah. So I mean, I didn't do the math. It was just sort of from experience. If the site's making, maybe 300 a month, you might be able to pick one up for that price. The other thing that's important for it to be beginner friendly is a platform that you understand. So usually it'll be a WordPress business, a WordPress website. That's pretty easy to sort of just jump straight in and figure it out. It's got a good content management system on the back end, which is easy to understand. You don't want to buy something that's all coded, and has no dashboard, for example. Like, that's going to be too complicated for a beginner. And often it will only have one or maybe two revenue streams. So, one could be AdSense, and another could be like Amazon affiliate or something like that. Just nice and simple, easy, very common monetization methods that are easy to wrap your head around. Everything else can be fairly varied. There's obviously loads of variables, but those, I think, are the main keys that I would focus on if you're looking for something beginner friendly.
And with those beginner friendly sites, what are usually the personas of the sellers? Are there people that have multiple websites? Are there people that it was a passion project and it's their main website and now they just want to move on and they want to get some cash? Is it people who invested it, like they invested it in like 5 years ago and now they feel like they want to sell it? What's usually the personas of the sellers?
Very broad spectrum there, but most commonly they are people who build businesses or build websites for a living. So they just build lots and lots of businesses, and then when one of them or multiple of them reach a certain point where it's okay, now we can sell it, let's sell them off, and then basically get the profit from the work that we put in to build it. That's the most common, especially for those smaller businesses. When you start getting to the bigger ones, it's more of a portfolio deal where, they've either built and done a similar thing, but they've focused more heavily on specific businesses. Once they've seen wins, you'll also start seeing people who have portfolios where they bought the businesses. So I've got a few clients who that's what they do. They buy businesses, they operate them and grow them for a few years, and then they resell for a profit. and cash in the bulk of their profit then. So, and that was my strategy as well. Quite often I would buy a business, work on it, operate it until it made its money back, and then I would sell. So once it broke even, that would be when I would start looking to sell.
Interesting. So most people would hold on to it for like, say, 30 months before selling if they wanted to break even before selling.
Well, less if they're growing it. So if you're working on it actively, presumably it would be less than 30 months because you've grown it. Yeah. So, I mean, there were times I would often sell businesses after like a year or less of having owned them.
Very cool. What was the main catalyst for you to transition from owning multiple websites and you had the knowledge to grow them to now just being the broker?
Yeah, okay. So this was actually a very slow transition for me. It happened very gradually. It's hard to pinpoint exactly what it was that pushed me in that direction, especially considering that the very first client I ever had was an absolute nightmare. And it was a drop shipping business, which, as I told you, I'd never had any experience brokering. It was just like there were so many things that went wrong with that. Mostly out of my own inexperience at the time being a broker. And I did take some time away after that client. So, I don't want this. I don't need it. I can keep doing what I'm doing. But I had a couple of successful clients. My first few clients were people who I had bought from myself. Like I looked at the businesses that they were selling and I'm like, I'm not in a position to buy that right now, but maybe I can help you sell it. So that's sort of what it ended up happening. I had some people who were close to me, my mentors, Matt and Liz Rard, and also my life partner, Natalie, who now actually helps me with the brokerage. She's technically the first broker to jump on and join me in the team. And she also helped me figure out that this is something that's a good idea to at least try and see where it leads. And I'm glad we did. Because, it's been very successful for us.
That's pretty cool. Last topic, tell me, how do you usually attract sellers? How do you attract your clients?
Oh, I love this. All right. So I started with just spreadsheets. I used Google Drive and just Google Sheets to track my clients. And at the time I remember saying, oh man, I don't know how I could possibly manage more than 5 clients at a time. Like, this is just like crazy. I can't, it was quite difficult. Now I use a tool called Trello, which is basically usually used as like a task management style, to-do list, etc. But I've designed it, my board, in a way that will have each list is a certain part in the process. So when a client comes in, they get put in the top, and I have checklists that are automatically filling for each, and basically just have one card per client. And then that way I can just go to Trello and I see all of the clients that I have at the moment, and I can, as they go through the process, you move them over to the next column, next column, until, of course, the deal is done. And it can also go backwards. So if we decide, okay, we don't want to represent that one, or we're going to wait a little while for the profits to go up, we'll move it back to like a follow-up section. So, that system that we've built, I really love it, because it's sort of like what I would consider one of the cornerstones of the brokerage. It helps us keep track of, last I checked a couple of weeks ago, I think we had 33 active clients that we were working with through various stages of the process, like who have contacted me for evaluation all the way through to I've just sold. Yeah.
Interesting. And how do these clients find out about you? How do you attract them? Is it mainly word of mouth?
It is. Most of them are word of mouth. They either see me on Flipper, other listings that I've got live at the time, and they see that I either get a good multiple or sell the business for a good price or whatever, and then they reach out to me that way. A lot of them do come to me through my own circles as well. Like I said, I've been doing this for 10 years, so of course I have contacts in the industry who know about me and like, I've got a business for sale, let's go to Joe and see what he can sell it for. But yeah, they come from all over. I've only recently started doing video interviews and podcasts and stuff specifically to market the brokerage in the last sort of 6 months or so. And even dabbling with some advertising, which I've never done before either, never needed to. So that's pretty exciting, trying to really push the growth of the business. Yeah, it's fun.
Over the last 2 to 3 years, what do you do during the slow periods where not many people reaching out, and you feel like you're sort of just like a boat that the engine's off and it's just floating. Is there anything you do to crank the nozzle? Is there any cold emails? Is there anything you can do?
Yeah, there is. It has happened. Obviously, like in any entrepreneur's life, there are these sort of ups and downs that happen in any business. Typically, what I do, so obviously I only get paid once the client has successfully sold their business. So I can see how many clients are in the pipeline, and I can see that even though I've just had a slow month, the next month might be really good because we've got lots of clients in the pipeline. So that's one thing that I look at that sort of keeps my perspective clear. I also I analyze quite a lot of data, especially my partner now. She's extremely good at this. I look mostly at averages. So, we know roughly how much each month is going to make. Obviously, a lot of fluctuation, but averagely we can expect this much. And, just keeping an eye on the bigger picture, just knowing that, what I'm doing is working, and just having faith in that, in my skill set and my ability to sell businesses for good prices and leaving my clients very happy.
That's super cool, Joe. Thank you so much for your time today. Where's the best place for people to find out more about what you do, maybe sell their websites if they need to? Where's the best place for people to connect with you?
So my website is probably the best place to go, justwebsitebrokerage.com. Link down below. That way, if you're a buyer or a seller, there are places there. If you're a buyer, you can sign up for my list and get emailed each time something that suits your criteria becomes live. If you're a seller, then there's a valuation form that you can fill in that will sort of get the ball rolling, and I can let you know how much your business is worth. We can have a discussion about whether or not it's worth selling now, maybe waiting a little while, or whatever. We can have that discussion. And if you want to reach out to me directly, I'm pretty active on LinkedIn, Joe Burill on LinkedIn, Burrill. That's probably the easiest way to get in touch with me.
That's beautiful. Thank you so much, Joe. I really appreciate it. I just love your passion. This is definitely something that you've put in a lot of time, and you have a lot of experience in this sort of website buying and selling space, and I can definitely feel that through the camera. And yeah, thank you so much for your time. I really love it.
Yeah, my pleasure, Andy. Thank you very much.
Awesome. So yeah, that's another episode of the podcast. Hope you guys got some value on today's episode. If you guys made it this far, thank you so much for your time. And I'll see you guys next week with another episode. Peace.